The musty scent of old books hung heavy in the air. Lisa Martin, an avid thrifter with a nose for hidden treasures, browsed the aisles of the dimly lit shop. Her fingers danced across dusty spines, each worn cover a whisper of forgotten stories. She paused, her eyes catching a glimpse of worn leather tucked away on a bottom shelf. It was an old diary, its once vibrant cover faded with time, the leather cracked and dry.
Intrigued, I pulled the diary from its resting place, its pages whispering secrets as I opened it. A strange sense of curiosity washed over me as I held the diary in my hands. Who had held this book? What stories did it contain? A name scrawled in faded ink on the inside cover drew her in further. Property of James Hawthorne. Lisa had always been drawn to the mystery of bygone eras, to the whispers of the past echoing through forgotten objects. This diary, she felt, was a portal to a different time, a tangible link to a life lived long ago. The faded ink, the brittle pages, the musty scent, they all spoke of a time capsule of experiences waiting to be unearthed. With a mix of excitement and trepidation, she made her purchase, unaware that this simple act of curiosity would unravel a chilling truth. As Lisa stepped back into the bustling street, the setting sun cast long shadows across the sidewalk. Clutching the diary close, she felt a shiver run down her spine, a sense of unease she couldn't quite place. It was as if the diary itself had cast a shadow over her, a premonition of the darkness she was about to uncover. Little did she know, her life was about to become entwined with the secrets held captive within the diary's worn pages.
The aroma of freshly brewed chamomile tea filled Lisa's cozy apartment. Rain pattered softly against the windows, creating a soothing rhythm that usually lulled her into a sense of peace. This evening, however, a strange anticipation thrummed beneath her skin. The old diary lay on the coffee table before her, its presence demanding attention.
Finally, I reached out, my fingers tracing the embossed lettering on its cover. With bated breath, Lisa opened the diary, its aged pages releasing a scent of time and decay. The handwriting was cramped and hurried, the ink faded and smudged in places. It was clear that the writer had filled these pages in haste, their words tumbling onto the paper with an urgency that hinted at a troubled mind. As Lisa began to read, she was pulled into the writer's world, a world of shadows and secrets. The diary chronicled the life of its author, a man named James Hawthorne, but it wasn't the mundane details of daily life that filled its pages. Instead, James wrote of dark thoughts, of a growing rage that simmered beneath the surface of his words. He wrote of slights and injustices, real or imagined, and of a growing desire for revenge against those he felt had wronged him. Lisa found herself both captivated and disturbed by the raw emotion bleeding through the writer's words. As the rain continued to fall outside, Lisa delved deeper into the diary, each page pulling her further into the labyrinth of James Hawthorne's mind. What began as simple curiosity was quickly morphing into something more unsettling. The diary was less a personal account and more a confession, a chilling glimpse into the darkest corners of a stranger's soul. A sense of dread began to creep in, settling like a weight in the pit of Lisa's stomach.
The diary's entries grew increasingly disturbing as Lisa read on. James Hawthorne's words painted vivid pictures of his growing obsession with a local businessman, a man he believed had cheated him out of his rightful inheritance. He documented the man's every move, describing his routine with a meticulousness that bordered on obsession. Lisa felt a chill run down her spine as she realized the depth of James's fixation.
In one particularly chilling entry, James described following the businessman to a secluded alleyway late one night. The words on the page dripped with malice, his handwriting growing more erratic as he recounted the confrontation. James wrote of a struggle, of his rage boiling over, of the metallic scent of blood filling the air. Lisa's breath caught in her throat as she read the chilling confession. As Lisa turned the page, she found a small, dried flower pressed between the brittle sheets. It was a delicate forget-me-not, its blue petals faded to a pale gray. The sight of the flower, a symbol of remembrance and enduring love, felt jarringly out of place amidst the darkness of James's words. It was a stark reminder of the humanity that lay buried beneath the layers of anger and despair. The diary ended abruptly, leaving Lisa with more questions than answers. What had happened to James Hawthorne? Had he truly committed the crime he described in such chilling detail? And who was the unfortunate soul he had claimed as his victim?
Lisa closed the diary, her mind racing. The words she had just read echoed in her ears, painting a gruesome picture in her mind. Could this diary be the key to solving a long-forgotten crime, or was it nothing more than the ramblings of a disturbed mind? The rational part of her urged her to dismiss it as fiction, but a nagging feeling in her gut told her otherwise. The diary had mentioned a specific date and location, details that seemed too specific to be fabricated.
Driven by a mix of morbid curiosity and a growing sense of responsibility, I decided to investigate further. I researched old news archives, my heart pounding as I stumbled upon an article detailing the disappearance of a local businessman decades earlier. The date and location matched the details in the diary. The article described the missing man as a well-respected member of the community, a man with no known enemies. His disappearance had baffled investigators at the time, and the case had eventually gone cold. Now, years later, Lisa held what could be the missing piece of the puzzle. The thought sent a shiver down her spine. As Lisa delved deeper into the case, she discovered that the missing businessman had been embroiled in a bitter legal battle over a contested inheritance. The other party involved? None other than a man named James Hawthorne. Suddenly, the diary's words took on a chilling new meaning. Lisa realized with growing horror that she might have stumbled upon the confession of a cold-blooded killer.
Despite the mounting evidence, a part of Lisa still clung to the hope that she was mistaken.
Perhaps the diary was nothing more than a work of fiction, a macabre tale penned by an imaginative mind. But deep down she knew the truth. The level of detail, the specific dates and locations, the chilling confession itself, it all pointed to a horrifying reality. The diary had awakened a sense of unease in me, a feeling that I was no longer safe. She had invited a stranger's darkness into her home, and now it felt as if that darkness had seeped into her own life. Every creak of her old apartment building, every shadow that danced across her walls, filled her with a sense of dread. Unable to shake the feeling of being watched, I found myself constantly looking over my shoulder. She imagined James Hawthorne's face everywhere she went, his haunting words echoing in her ears. The once familiar streets of her city now seemed menacing, filled with hidden dangers lurking around every corner. Tormented by what I had read, I knew I couldn't ignore the truth any longer. I had to share my discovery, to bring James Hawthorne's crimes to light, even if it meant confronting the darkness head-on. With a deep breath and a newfound sense of resolve, Lisa picked up the phone and dialed the number for the police. Little did she know, her decision would set in motion a chain of events that would unravel a decades-old mystery and expose a truth far more sinister than she could have ever imagined.
The phone felt cold and lifeless in Lisa's trembling hand. Each unanswered ring amplified the pounding in her chest, a frantic drumbeat against her ribs. Doubt gnawed at the edges of her resolve.
Was I overreacting? Could a dusty old diary truly hold the key to a decades-old mystery, or was I letting my imagination run wild? Finally, a gruff voice answered, snapping her out of her thoughts.
"This is Detective Miller. What's your emergency?" Lisa hesitated, her throat suddenly dry. The weight of what she was about to reveal pressed down on her, stealing her breath.
I think I have information about a missing person case. The detective's tone remained unconvinced.
"Look, ma'am, we get calls like this all the time. Unless you have concrete evidence." Lisa cut him off, her voice gaining strength with each word.
"It's about James Hawthorne." The name hung heavy in the air between them. "I think he might be..." Involved in a crime. There was a moment of stunned silence on the other end of the line, and then a shift in the detective's tone. Gone was the initial skepticism, replaced by a newfound interest.
You say you have information about James Hawthorne, and you believe this is connected to a crime? Lisa took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come.
Yes, and I think I have proof.
The police station was a stark contrast to Lisa's cozy apartment, all cold linoleum floors and flickering fluorescent lights. The air hung heavy with the weight of untold stories, of crimes solved and mysteries lingering in the shadows. Lisa sat nervously across from Detective Miller, the old diary resting on the table between them like a ticking time bomb. Detective Miller, a seasoned investigator with a world weariness etched into his features, carefully examined the diary, his brow furrowed in concentration. He flipped through the brittle pages, his eyes scanning the faded ink, absorbing the disturbing words that chronicled James Hawthorne's descent into darkness. The silence in the room was broken only by the rustle of paper and the ticking of the clock on the wall.
So, you found this in a thrift store? Detective Miller finally asked, his voice betraying a hint of disbelief. Lisa nodded, recounting her story once more, her voice gaining confidence as she detailed the chilling entries and the coincidences that had led her to contact the police. As she spoke, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was stepping into a story ripped from the pages of a crime novel. Detective Miller listened intently, his expression unreadable. When Lisa finished speaking, he leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled thoughtfully beneath his chin. This is quite the story, Miss Martin, but without a body, without any physical evidence, it's just a story. Lisa's heart sank. Was that it? Was her discovery going to be dismissed as nothing more than the ramblings of a madman?
Section 3, The Vanishing Act.
James Hawthorne disappeared 40 years ago, vanished without a trace. No witnesses, no leads, no body. The case went cold years ago. He tapped a faded file on his desk, the name Hawthorne printed across the top in bold black letters. Lisa listened intently, her mind struggling to reconcile the image of the missing man from the faded news clippings with the disturbed individual who had penned the chilling words in the diary. The James Hawthorne in the articles was a successful businessman, a pillar of the community, a man with a bright future ahead of him. The James Hawthorne in the diary was a shadow, a whisper of obsession and anger, a man teetering on the edge of a dark abyss. The police at the time suspected foul play, but they could never prove anything. Hawthorne's disappearance remained a mystery, a ghost story whispered in the hushed tones of the city's underbelly. He paused, his gaze fixed on Lisa. And now, 40 years later, you walk in here with his diary, claiming he might be involved in a crime. The weight of the detective's words settled heavily on Lisa's shoulders. She understood his skepticism. It was a wild tale, even to her own ears, and yet deep down she couldn't shake the feeling that she was sitting on a powder keg of truth. A truth that had been buried for decades, waiting for the right moment to explode.
Section 4, A Face in the Shadows.
We need more than just a diary. We need something concrete, something to connect this confession to an actual crime. Is there anything else? Any detail, no matter how small, that you remember from the diary? Lisa racked her brain, trying to recall every word, every nuance from the diary entries. She remembered the businessman's name, the details of his routine, the chilling description of the alleyway confrontation, and then it hit her.
Wait, there was a flower. A pressed forget-me-not tucked between the pages. Detective Carter raised an eyebrow, intrigued.
A flower?
It was pale blue, almost gray. I remember thinking it was strange, finding something so delicate in such a dark place. She could still see it vividly in her mind's eye, a fragile symbol of remembrance trapped within the pages of a chilling confession. The detective's eyes narrowed. a glint of interest flickering in their depths. He jotted down a note on his notepad, his pen scratching against the paper.
A forget-me-not. Interesting. We'll look into it. For now, Miss Martin, you've done your part. We'll take it from here.
Section 5. A Tangled Web. As Lisa left the police station, the weight of the day pressed down on her. She had done what she believed was right, handing over the diary and its secrets to the authorities. But a part of her couldn't help but feel a sense of unease, a nagging feeling that she had opened a Pandora's box of darkness that she might not be able to close. The city lights seemed to blur as she walked, the familiar streets now imbued with a sense of foreboding. Each passer-by became a potential suspect, their faces morphing into the shadowy figure of James Hawthorne in her mind's eye. The diary's words echoed in her ears, a constant reminder of the darkness that lurked beneath the surface of everyday life. Back in the quiet solitude of her apartment, Lisa tried to shake off the unsettling feeling that clung to her like a shroud. She made herself a cup of tea, hoping the familiar ritual would soothe her frayed nerves. But even the warmth of the mug in her hands couldn't chase away the chill that had settled deep within her bones. As she sipped her tea, her gaze fell upon the stack of old news clippings she had printed out earlier. The headlines screamed of the missing businessman, his face staring back at her, frozen in time. But it was another photo, a smaller one tucked away in the corner of one of the articles, that caught her attention. It was a picture of the businessman with his wife, a beautiful woman with kind eyes and a warm smile. And standing beside her, his arm draped possessively around her shoulders, was a man Lisa recognized instantly. It was James Hawthorne.
My breath caught in my throat, the teacup clattering against the saucer in my trembling hand. The image in the newspaper clipping was unmistakable. James Hawthorne, his face etched with a chilling familiarity, stood beside the missing businessman's wife. The realization hit me like a physical blow, sending a wave of nausea rolling through me. They knew each other. But how well? The implications of this discovery were staggering. If James Hawthorne and the businessman's wife were acquainted, it cast a whole new light on his disappearance. Was this personal? A crime of passion fueled by jealousy and deceit? The diary's entries, once unsettling but distant, now pulsed with a terrifying immediacy. I felt a cold dread creep up my spine as the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. Frantically, I reread the news clippings, searching for any mention of a connection between James Hawthorne and the businessman's wife. The articles spoke of a loving marriage, a devoted couple, but now those words seemed hollow, a carefully constructed facade masking a darker truth. Had the police overlooked this connection at the time, or was there more to the story than met the eye? The more I considered the possibility, the more convinced I became that this revelation was the key to unraveling the mystery. I had to contact Detective Miller immediately. This wasn't just about a missing person case anymore. It was about exposing a potential conspiracy, a web of secrets and lies that had remained hidden for far too long.
The harsh fluorescent lights of the interrogation room seemed to buzz with anticipation as Lisa laid out her findings before Detective Miller. The detective, initially skeptical of her late-night call, listened with growing interest as she detailed the connection between James Hawthorne and the missing man's wife. The revelation hung in the air between them, a tangible shift in the atmosphere.
This changes things. If Hawthorne was involved with the victim's wife, it points to a possible motive, a personal connection that could explain his disappearance. This, combined with your discovery, strengthens our suspicions. Hawthorne is no longer just a missing person. He's a person of interest in a potential homicide investigation.
The weight of the detective's words settled heavily on Lisa's shoulders. She had unearthed a truth that had been buried for decades, but with it came a sense of responsibility, a growing unease as she realized the potential consequences of her actions. Had she set in motion a chain of events that would bring justice to a grieving family, or had she unwittingly awakened a sleeping monster?
We need to bring in the wife for questioning, see if her story aligns with what we know or if she's been harboring secrets all these years. Miss Martin, you've been more helpful than you know. Your discovery might just be the break we need to finally crack this case wide open.
The news of the reopened investigation sent ripples through the community, unearthing whispers and rumors that had long been buried beneath the surface of polite society. The missing businessman's wife, once the picture of grieving widowhood, now found herself thrust into the harsh glare of the media spotlight, her every move scrutinized, her every word dissected for any hint of guilt or deception.
Detective Miller, a seasoned investigator with a nose for inconsistencies, approached the interview with a practiced calm, his demeanor disarmingly casual. He allowed the wife to tell her story, her voice trembling with a mixture of grief and indignation as she recounted the events surrounding her husband's disappearance. She spoke of a loving marriage, a devoted husband, a life shattered by a senseless tragedy. But as the interview progressed, Detective Miller noticed subtle discrepancies in her narrative, tiny cracks in the carefully constructed facade she presented. Her timeline didn't quite add up, her alibi shaky at best. And then there were the veiled glances, the fleeting moments of panic that flickered across her eyes when certain topics arose, betraying the carefully rehearsed composure. When confronted with the evidence, the photograph of her standing next to James Hawthorne, the wife's carefully constructed composure crumbled. Her denial morphed into a desperate attempt to explain away the connection, her words tumbling over each other in a torrent of justifications and half-truths. But it was too late. The seeds of doubt had been sown, and Detective Miller, like a gardener tending to a blooming flower of suspicion, was determined to watch them grow.
Section 4. The Forgotten Witness. As the investigation intensified, Detective Miller decided to revisit the original case files, hoping to find any overlooked details that might shed light on the mystery. The files, thick with faded reports and witness statements, painted a picture of a thorough but ultimately fruitless investigation.
Leads had been pursued, dead ends encountered, but no concrete evidence had ever surfaced to explain James Hawthorne's sudden disappearance.
As he sifted through the documents, a particular name on a faded witness statement caught his eye. The name was barely legible, the handwriting shaky and uneven, as if penned by a trembling hand. The statement belonged to an elderly neighbor who had lived across the street from James Hawthorne at the time of his disappearance.
The neighbor, now long deceased, had reported seeing Hawthorne arguing with an unidentified woman in his front yard the night he vanished.
Intrigued, Detective Miller dug deeper, searching for any follow-up on this witness statement. But to his surprise, he found nothing. It was as if the lead had been noted and then promptly forgotten, lost in the shuffle of a rapidly cooling investigation.
He wondered if this forgotten witness, this seemingly insignificant detail, might hold the key to unlocking the truth. Time was of the essence.
With each passing day, the trail grew colder, the memories faded, the chances of finding answers dwindling with the setting sun. Detective Miller knew he had to act fast, to track down any surviving relatives or friends of the deceased neighbor, anyone who might recall details of that fateful night, any scrap of information that could help piece together the puzzle of James Hawthorne's disappearance. Section 5. A Race Against Time. The clock was ticking. With each passing hour, the mystery surrounding James Hawthorne's disappearance seemed to deepen, the lines between truth and deception blurring into a dizzying kaleidoscope of possibilities.
Driven by a relentless pursuit of justice and a nagging feeling that he was on the verge of a breakthrough, he worked tirelessly, following every lead, no matter how tenuous, determined to untangle the web of secrets that had remained hidden for far too long.
Lisa, meanwhile, found herself unable to escape the gravitational pull of the case.
The diary's words haunted her dreams. The faces of the missing businessman and his wife burned into her memory. She spent her days poring over old news articles, her evenings lost in online forums dedicated to unsolved mysteries, her every waking moment consumed by the desire to see justice served.
As the investigation progressed, a sense of urgency permeated the air. The police presence in the once peaceful neighborhood intensified, patrol cars becoming a constant fixture on the quiet, tree-lined streets. Rumors swirled like autumn leaves in the wind, whispers of clandestine affairs, hidden motives, and long-buried secrets. The community, once a haven of tranquility, now buzzed with an undercurrent of suspicion and unease.
With each passing day, the stakes grew higher, the pressure mounting on Detective Miller and his team to find answers. They were racing against time, against fading memories, against the very real possibility that the truth might forever remain buried beneath layers of deceit and the passage of time.
But they refused to give up hope. They owed it to the victims, to their families, and to themselves to bring the truth to light no matter the cost. Part 16. Digging Up the Past. The air was thick and heavy, smelling like wet dirt and anticipation, as Detective Miller and his team arrived at the Hawthorne house. The once fancy mansion, now quiet and spooky, stood like a silent guard, holding on to its secrets. Years of nobody caring for it had made the walls crumble, the windows boarded up and weeds grow everywhere. Detective Miller, it felt like the house was hiding something, keeping its secrets locked away. With a search warrant and a new determination, the team spread out across the property. Their footsteps echoed in the quiet. Every creaking floorboard, every rustling leaf, made the tension stronger. It felt like they were walking on sacred ground, a place where the past didn't want to stay hidden. Detective Miller, we focused on the big, messy backyard, a wild area that used to be a beautiful garden. With shovels and special radar equipment, the team worked hard. Their movements were careful and their faces serious. They were looking for any clue, any change in the ground that might show where a body was buried. Detective Miller, after working for days, as the sun started to set, everyone suddenly gasped. The radar had found something strange under a very old oak tree. The tree's branches were twisted and gnarled like the bony fingers of a skeleton reaching up from the ground. A hush fell over the search party as they carefully excavated the area beneath the oak tree, their movements cautious, their faces illuminated by the eerie glow of floodlights. The air crackled with anticipation, a palpable sense of dread mixing with the pungent scent of freshly turned earth. Every shovelful of dirt removed seemed to bring them closer to the truth, to the secrets that lay hidden beneath the surface.
As the excavation deepened, a chilling discovery emerged from the earth. A human skeleton, its bones bleached white by time, lay nestled in a shallow grave. The skeletal fingers clutched a tarnished silver locket, a single delicate forget-me-not pressed against the inside of its glass casing.
The sight sent a shiver down Detective Miller's spine, a gruesome confirmation of his suspicions. A forensic anthropologist was immediately called to the scene, her trained eyes scanning the skeletal remains, her fingers gently probing for clues.
The victim, she determined, was a male, likely in his late 30s or early 40s at the time of his death. The cause of death was blunt force trauma to the skull, consistent with a blow from a heavy object, and the time of death, roughly 40 years ago.
The weight of the discovery hung heavy in the air, a grim reminder of the passage of time and the enduring power of secrets. The oak tree, a silent witness to a long-ago crime, seemed to groan under the weight of its knowledge, its branches swaying gently in the breeze as if whispering a long-forgotten story. The discovery of the skeletal remains sent shockwaves through the investigation, confirming their worst fears. while simultaneously deepening the mystery. The victim's identity was still unknown, but the silver locket with its delicate forget-me-not hinted at a personal connection, a story waiting to be told.
Back at the station, the forensic team meticulously examined the locket, hoping to find any identifying marks or inscriptions that could lead them to the victim's identity. As one of the technicians carefully pried open the locket's delicate hinge, a gasp escaped her lips. Inside, nestled alongside the faded forget-me-not, was a tiny folded piece of paper.
With trembling hands, Detective Miller carefully unfolded the paper, his heart pounding in his chest. The message, scrawled in faded ink, was brief but chilling. He watches. He waits. He always gets his due.
The words were eerily familiar, echoing the chilling tone and cryptic nature of the entries in James Hawthorne's diary. But as Detective Miller stared at the note, a cold realization washed over him. The handwriting was not James Hawthorne's. It was different, more controlled, more deliberate. It was as if someone had meticulously studied Hawthorne's handwriting, mimicking his style while subtly altering the strokes, like a master forger replicating a priceless work of art.
The discovery of the note, a chilling echo of James Hawthorne's own words, sent a collective shiver down the spines of the investigative team. It was as if they were dealing not with a single disturbed individual, but with a legacy of darkness, a pattern of behavior passed down through generations like a sinister inheritance.
Detective Miller, his intuition screaming that they were on the precipice of uncovering something far more sinister than they could have ever imagined, delved deeper into the Hawthorne family history. He requested archives of old newspapers, birth records, death certificates, anything that could shed light on the family's past, their secrets, their sins.
As he pieced together the fragments of information, a disturbing pattern began to emerge. The Hawthorne family tree was littered with tales of tragedy, unexplained disappearances, and untimely deaths. Accusations of violence, whispers of madness, and rumors of dark secrets clung to the family name like cobwebs in a forgotten attic.
One particular story, buried deep within the archives of a local newspaper, caught Detective Miller's attention. It was a brief article, dated almost a century earlier, detailing the mysterious disappearance of a young woman who had been romantically linked to the heir of the Hawthorne estate. Her body had never been found, but rumors persisted that she had been murdered, her body buried somewhere on the vast Hawthorne property.
The weight of these discoveries was almost too much to bear, each revelation adding another layer to the dark and twisted legacy of the Hawthorne family. Driven by the growing suspicion that the Hawthorne family history was intricately intertwined with the case, Detective Miller decided to pay a visit to the last surviving member of the Hawthorne lineage, James Hawthorne's estranged younger brother, William.
William, now a frail and reclusive man in his late 70s, lived a quiet life on the outskirts of town, haunted by the shadows of his family's past.
The interview took place in William's dimly lit living room, the air thick with the scent of mothballs and forgotten memories.
As I gently questioned William about his family, his childhood, his relationship with his brother, a palpable sadness washed over the old man's features.
It was clear that William carried the weight of his family's legacy like a heavy cloak draped over his thin shoulders. William's recollections of his brother were fragmented, a mixture of fondness and fear.
He spoke of James's quick temper, his possessive nature, his unsettling fascination with their family history, particularly the darker chapters that most sought to forget.
And then, with a trembling voice, William revealed a chilling detail.
He recalled James mentioning a secret hiding place on the property, a place where their ancestors had buried unpleasant truths that were best left undisturbed.
As Detective Miller listened intently, a sense of urgency gripped him. He realized that the key to solving the case lay not in the present, but in the past, buried deep within the Hawthorne family history, a twisted tapestry woven from secrets, lies, and the sins of generations. Armed with William's revelation and a renewed sense of purpose, Detective Miller and his team returned to the Hawthorne estate, this time their focus shifting from the sprawling backyard to the main house itself.
We were looking for any sign of a hidden room, a secret chamber where generations of Hawthornes might have concealed their darkest deeds.
The search led them deep into the bowels of the house, down a creaking staircase hidden behind a dusty tapestry, and into a dimly lit basement, its air thick with the musty scent of decay and forgotten memories.
There, concealed behind a false wall, we discovered a small windowless room, its walls lined with shelves stacked high with leather-bound journals, their covers identical to the one Lisa had found in the thrift store.
As Detective Miller carefully lifted one of the journals from its shelf, a chill ran down his spine. The cover felt cold and lifeless beneath his touch, as if imbued with the residual energy of its author.
I opened the journal, my eyes scanning the faded ink, my heart pounding in my chest. The words that greeted me confirmed my worst fears.
The Hawthorne Legacy lives on. The entry began, the handwriting a chilling replica of James's, but with a subtle shift in the slant of the letters, a subtle clue that betrayed a different hand.
Like father, like son, the sins of the father are passed down through the bloodline, a burden to bear, a darkness to embrace.
A cold dread settled over Detective Miller as he flipped through the pages of the journal, each chilling entry revealing a new layer of depravity. It wasn't just James's confession he held in his hands, it was a chronicle of generations of darkness, a family legacy steeped in violence and deceit.
The journals, meticulously organized by date, detailed a horrifying pattern of manipulation, obsession, and murder, stretching back over a century. The entries painted a gruesome picture of the Hawthorne family's descent into madness.
Each generation seemed to inherit a twisted sense of entitlement, a belief that they were above the law, free to indulge their darkest impulses without consequence. They preyed on the vulnerable, those they deemed beneath them, their victims disappearing without a trace, their stories silenced by fear and the passage of time.
The journals revealed a chilling methodology, a pattern to the Hawthornes' crimes. They would select their victims carefully, often individuals who posed a threat to their carefully constructed facades of respectability, or who possessed something they coveted.
They would then weave a web of manipulation and deceit, drawing their victims into their confidence, earning their trust before striking with calculated precision.
As I delved deeper into the journals, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was staring into the abyss of a family curse, a cycle of violence and madness that seemed destined to repeat itself with each passing generation. The weight of my responsibility pressed down on me, the knowledge that I held the power to break this cycle, to bring an end to the Hawthorne legacy of evil.
The discovery of the journals sent shockwaves through the investigation, the scope of the case expanding exponentially with each passing hour. The once straightforward missing person case had transformed into something far more sinister, a multi-generational conspiracy of silence and violence that had haunted the town for over a century.
The investigation took on a frantic pace as the team raced against time to identify the victims, to piece together the fragmented stories of lives cut short by the Hawthorne family's reign of terror. The journals provided a roadmap, but many details remained shrouded in mystery, lost to the passage of time and the cryptic nature of the entries.
Detective Miller, haunted by the faces of the unidentified victims staring back at him from faded photographs and missing person reports, found himself drawn back to the Hawthorne estate time and again. He wandered the halls of the grand old house, trying to connect with the echoes of the past, to hear the whispers of the victims crying out from beyond the grave.
He spent hours in the secret room surrounded by the journals, their leather covers cold and lifeless beneath his touch, like the skin of a reptile. He read each entry meticulously, searching for clues, for connections, for any scrap of information that might help him bring closure to the families who had waited decades for answers.
As the investigation progressed, a chilling realization dawned on Detective Miller. The journals detailed the crimes of several generations of Hawthornes, but one name was conspicuously absent from the macabre family tree: James Hawthorne himself.
The last entry in his journal ended abruptly just weeks before his disappearance, leaving a void in the narrative, a missing piece of the puzzle that gnawed at the detective's mind. The question haunted Detective Miller's every waking moment. What had happened to James Hawthorne? Had he met an untimely end at the hands of his own family, his crimes finally catching up with him? Or had he simply vanished into thin air, taking the truth of his final days with him to the grave?
The possibility that James Hawthorne might still be alive sent a shiver down the detective's spine. The thought of that much darkness still lurking out there, hidden in plain sight, waiting for the right moment to resurface, was almost too terrifying to contemplate.
Driven by a renewed sense of urgency, Detective Miller decided to shift his focus to the missing heir. He revisited old witness statements, re-examined the physical evidence, and explored every possible avenue, determined to uncover the truth of James Hawthorne's fate, no matter how unsettling it might be.
Following the threads of James Hawthorne's life, Detective Miller uncovered a series of disturbing connections between the missing heir and a shadowy organization known as the Order. The Order, shrouded in secrecy and whispered rumors, was believed to be a clandestine society dedicated to preserving the purity of a certain lineage, their methods brutal, and their reach extending far beyond the confines of the small town.
Witnesses described the Order as a group of influential figures, their faces hidden behind elaborate masks, their voices distorted by voice modulators. They moved in the shadows, their influence felt but rarely seen, their motives a closely guarded secret. Some whispered that they were descendants of the town's founding fathers, determined to maintain their grip on power, while others claimed they were something far more sinister, their roots stretching back to ancient, forbidden knowledge.
The more Detective Miller learned about the Order, the more convinced he became that they held the key to unraveling the mystery of James Hawthorne's disappearance. The Order's obsession with lineage and their ruthlessness in eliminating threats to their power aligned with the Hawthorne family's own twisted values.
Had James Hawthorne stumbled upon something within the Order, a truth too dangerous to reveal, that had sealed his fate? The investigation into the Order proved to be a treacherous undertaking. Their network of influence ran deep, their secrets protected by a wall of silence and fear. Witnesses were reluctant to talk, their testimonies riddled with contradictions and veiled threats. It was clear that Detective Miller was treading on dangerous ground, but he refused to be deterred. He knew that the truth, however ugly it might be, lay at the heart of this shadowy organization. As Detective Miller dug deeper into the Order's activities, he uncovered a trail of financial irregularities, political maneuvering, and carefully orchestrated disappearances that pointed to a conspiracy far more vast and insidious than he could have ever imagined.
The Order's influence extended far beyond the confines of the small town, their tendrils reaching into the highest levels of government, law enforcement, and even the media.
The realization that he was dealing with an organization so deeply embedded within the fabric of society sent a chill down Detective Miller's spine. He felt a profound sense of unease, a growing paranoia that he was being watched, his every move monitored by unseen eyes.
He knew that he had to tread carefully, that one wrong step could have deadly consequences. But Detective Miller was not one to be intimidated.
He had dedicated his life to upholding the law, to seeking justice for the voiceless, and he refused to let fear deter him from uncovering the truth. He assembled a trusted team of investigators, their identities shrouded in secrecy, their every move carefully calculated to avoid detection.
Together, they worked tirelessly, following the money trail, tracing phone records, and cultivating confidential informants within the Order's ranks. Slowly but surely, they began to piece together a picture of the organization's inner workings, their hierarchy, their methods, and their ultimate objective: to shape the world according to their own twisted ideology.
The investigation culminated in a dramatic raid on the Order's secret headquarters, a sprawling underground complex hidden beneath the facade of an abandoned industrial warehouse.
The air crackled with tension as Detective Miller and his team stormed the facility, their weapons drawn, their faces grim with determination. The scene that greeted them was like something out of a nightmare.
The complex was a labyrinth of sterile white corridors and windowless rooms, the air thick with the scent of disinfectant and fear. They discovered a hidden archive containing decades' worth of incriminating documents, a torture chamber equipped with an arsenal of medieval-looking devices, and a ritual chamber adorned with occult symbols and stained with what appeared to be blood.
As they delved deeper into the complex, they encountered fierce resistance from the Order's loyal followers, their faces contorted with a mixture of fanaticism and terror. Gunfire erupted, echoing through the confined space, the deafening sound of bullets ricocheting off metal walls.
In the ensuing chaos, Detective Miller came face to face with the leader of the Order, a figure shrouded in shadow, their voice distorted by a voice modulator. The leader, their words dripping with venom, revealed the horrifying truth. James Hawthorne had been their most promising disciple, but his ambition had proven to be his downfall. He had sought to usurp control, to expose their secrets, and they had been forced to silence him.
But the Order had underestimated Detective Miller's determination. In a final act of desperation, the leader lunged at the detective, a glint of steel flashing in their hand. A struggle ensued, the two men grappling for control, their shadows dancing across the cold, concrete floor. In the end, it was Detective Miller who emerged victorious, the leader of the Order lying dead at his feet, their secrets dying with them. The raid on the Order's headquarters sent shockwaves through the community, the scandal toppling powerful figures and exposing a web of corruption that stretched far beyond the town's borders. The arrest of prominent businessmen, politicians, and even law enforcement officials dominated headlines, each revelation a stark reminder of the insidious nature of power and the ease with which it could be abused.
For Detective Miller, the victory felt bittersweet. He had brought down a criminal enterprise that had cast a long shadow over the town, but the cost of uncovering the truth had been steep. He had stared into the abyss of human depravity and emerged forever changed, the experience leaving an indelible mark on his soul.
Lisa Martin, once an outsider looking in, found herself thrust into the center of a media storm. Her discovery of the diary had set in motion a chain of events that had exposed a conspiracy of unimaginable proportions. But her newfound notoriety came at a price. The once ordinary rhythm of her life had been shattered, replaced by a constant barrage of interview requests, public scrutiny, and the unsettling feeling that she had opened a door she could never close.
The case, however, was far from over. The Order's leader might have been brought to justice, but their network of influence ran deep, and there were those who had escaped the raid, their loyalties untested, their motives shrouded in shadow. The threat, it seemed, was far from extinguished. In the aftermath of the raid, Detective Miller found himself wrestling with a profound sense of unease. The Order's headquarters had yielded a treasure trove of evidence, but many questions remained unanswered, loose threads that refused to be neatly tied together.
The fate of James Hawthorne, the missing heir whose disappearance had set the entire investigation in motion, remained a haunting mystery. Had the Order silenced him permanently, as their leader had claimed? Or had he somehow managed to escape their clutches, vanishing into the shadows to plot his revenge?
The journals, while shedding light on the Hawthorne family's dark legacy, had also raised more questions than answers. What had driven them to such extremes of depravity? What dark secrets had fueled their insatiable thirst for power and control? And were there other journals out there, hidden away in the shadows, that chronicled even more unspeakable acts?
The weight of these unanswered questions pressed down on Detective Miller, a constant reminder that the case, despite its apparent resolution, was far from closed. He knew that the truth, like a phantom limb, would continue to haunt him, beckoning him back into the labyrinth, urging him to keep searching, even if it meant confronting the darkness that lurked at the heart of the human soul.
In the quiet solitude of his study, William Hawthorne, the last surviving member of his bloodline, sat hunched over a weathered photo album, his eyes tracing the faded images of his ancestors, the weight of his family's legacy pressed down on him, a suffocating burden of guilt and shame.
He thought of his brother James, his face forever frozen in a mask of youthful arrogance, his eyes burning with an unsettling intensity. Had he ever truly known the depths of his brother's darkness? Had he, through his silence and complicity, enabled the horrors that had unfolded?
The revelations of the past few weeks had shattered the carefully constructed illusion of normalcy William had clung to for so long. The Hawthorne name, once synonymous with wealth and prestige, was now irrevocably stained, a chilling reminder of the corrosive power of secrets and the insidious nature of evil.
As he closed the photo album, his gaze lingered on a faded image of himself as a young boy, his arm draped around his brother's shoulders, their smiles bright and carefree. In that moment, before the shadows had fully consumed them, they had been just brothers, bound by the unbreakable bonds of blood and history. But the past could not be rewritten, and the sins of the father, it seemed, were destined to cast a long shadow over the lives of their descendants.
The town, once a tranquil haven nestled amidst rolling hills and whispering trees, struggled to come to terms with the revelations that had shaken it to its core. The arrest of prominent figures, the exposure of the Order's sinister agenda, and the gruesome discoveries on the Hawthorne estate had left an indelible mark on the collective psyche, a chilling reminder that darkness could lurk even in the most idyllic of settings.
The whispers started subtly, hushed conversations in grocery store aisles, uneasy glances exchanged across restaurant tables, a palpable tension that hung in the air like the scent of a gathering storm. Trust had been shattered, and the once familiar faces of neighbors and community leaders now seemed shrouded in doubt, their motives suspect, their smiles strained.
As the initial shock subsided, a profound sense of unease settled over the town, a collective recognition that the true extent of the conspiracy might never be fully known. The Order had been vanquished, but the seeds of doubt had been sown, and the tendrils of fear, like the roots of a poisonous vine, had burrowed deep into the fertile soil of the community's subconscious.
The shadows, it seemed, lingered, a constant reminder that even in the aftermath of tragedy, some wounds ran too deep to ever truly heal. The town, forever marked by the horrors it had endured, would forever bear the scars of the past, a cautionary tale whispered on the wind. A reminder that even in the brightest of sunshine, darkness was never far away.